Are we good? Okay. All right, everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for coming out to say hi and being here with me. I know it's a gorgeous day. So let's talk about road trips and what you can do to make it more comfortable for your dog. First of all, I'm Kate Titus. I know just about everybody. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. I'm the owner and founder of Loyal Companion. So this is my spot along with my staff. We've been here. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary in January, so we're very happy to be here. I've been a canine mobility specialist for about 15 years now. Have done work with lots of different disabilities and in the dogs, and also helping support you as caregivers in taking care of your dog. So I am a big believer in making sure that our dogs stay part of our family. And I think that is an essential piece of their quality of life. And that, to me, I want to make it as possible as we can to keep our dogs with us and take them wherever we want to go and wherever makes sense for them and for you. So to do that, we want to make sure they have a safe, comfortable and a stress-free journey as possible. Now that could be across town or across the state or across the country. How many of you have driven a dog, more than a couple of hours? Yeah, okay. Across the state? Yep. And you've driven from New York. Yeah, country, right? Yep. Okay. So you know that it's a trick. And when you have a dog who is mobility challenged, it's an even bigger trick. There are lots of moving parts, lots of pieces. So my goal here today is to help you recognize what to think about, right? So I'm going to give you a lot to think about today. I'm going to give you some maybe some different perspectives on how to consider what is what you need to think about as you're planning your trip and as you're on your trip. Okay, so where are we going to go? So we're going to talk about the basics of your travel. So getting him in and out of the vehicle, keeping him safe and comfortable in the vehicle. We're also going to talk about a go bag, which is what's on the counter up here. And we're going to talk about productive rest stops in more than just emptying bladder and bowel, right? So what can you do to make the most of those stops that you make? All right. Let's talk about briefly, let's just talk about some of the more common challenges. So we've worked with, how many of you have a senior dog that you travel with? Okay. Senior dog, we've worked with dogs with intervertebral disc disease. I know that you have one of those. We talked about degenerative myelopathy, which is also a nerve condition. We talked about osteoarthritis. It's something like, the number I think now is somewhere in the neighborhood of 67 or 68% of all dogs now have arthritis, which is a bit of a scary number. So we've dealt a lot with that. Cranial cruciate ligaments, traveling with those dogs can be a challenge because they usually are ready to go, but their body's not quite ready to go. Some hyperextending carpuses, and so wrists and ankles or hocks, and other neurologic conditions. So all of those mobility conditions have different things you need to consider. A dog with a CCL tear is very different from a dog that has intervertebral disc disease, who may not be able to use rear limbs or front limbs, or even DM or any other neurologic condition. So the impact on travel is going to affect quite a few things. So how you get them in and out of the vehicle, how they maintain their balance during the travel. So do they like to stand up and look out the window? That's not as easy for a neuro dog to be able to do as it may be for a dog that has hip dysplasia or arthritis, something along those lines. And keeping them comfortable for long distance journeys, whether that's 15 minutes across town or it's across the country, we need to keep them as comfortable as possible. So how we keep a neuro dog comfortable is going to be much different than how we keep a cranial cruciate CCL dog comfortable. And the other kind of the big wild card is going to be whether your dog has any incontinence. How many of you travel with a dog with incontinence? That's a lot of fun, isn't it? So that can be the wild card. So we are going to touch on that a little bit. And kind of the additional complexity that adds to your trip. So as you're considering what your individual dog or dogs need, first thing you need to do is you need to talk to your veterinarian. Is it safe for your dog to be traveling longer distances? Are there medications you need to make sure that you have? Are there precautions that you need to take? If you have a dog that has a heart condition, are you planning to go to elevation? You need to think about those kind of things. You need to watch your dog's behavior while you're on your trip, even before, during, and after, to see if you notice any changes, anything concerning. You just need to have an eye on your dog. You should have a good idea of how your dog has traveled in the very recent past. So if you decided to go up to Phoenix, let's say you decided to drive 2 hours with your dog, and it was not a great journey, it was not a great experience, if you can't point to some way that you can turn that around, maybe they stood up too long. Okay, so how do you figure out how to do that? If you don't have any glaring changes that you can make, maybe a cross-state or cross-country journey is not what your dog is up to. So being mindful of how they have traveled in the recent past is going to be important. And again, recognizing any of those, any mobility challenges prior to leaving on your travel is going to be important. And finally, I'm one of those people that likes to plan things out, sometimes to the point where I take all the fun out of the travel. But what do you need to be prepared for? If you have an incontinent dog, you better have your diaper bag ready to go. It needs to be fully stocked. How many diapers do you need? How many pads do you need? How many belly wraps? Do you need your Boudreaux's butt paste if they get rash? They get a rash. How often do I have to stop to do expressing? All of those kind of things. So as it pertains to your dog, you want to be thinking about what do you have to do on an everyday basis, and then how do I make that travel friendly? How am I able to take that on the road? So we're going to talk about some of those things as we go through here. So let's talk about loading and unloading. And I think this one is one that applies to everything, frankly. This is trip across town, trip across the state. This happens a lot. So what I'd like to have you think about today is we're going to think about your vehicle. We're going to think about how you get them in and out and what kind of equipment you need to do that. What we're not going to talk about are specific techniques of getting them in and out, because I think that is very dog specific, and that's something we need to work on. Not only what is their disability or challenge, but where is their head? What's their mindset? What's their confidence level look like? Because those things are all going to play a role in how you're able to load and unload safely and comfortably. So let's talk about the vehicle. All right, how many of you drive a car? Okay, how many of you drive an SUV? Okay, truck. Okay, so let's think about those. Next question I'm going to ask is, where does your dog ride? So if you have an SUV, do they ride in the cargo, back seat, or front seat? Back seat? Front seat? Yeah.
In the back, in a kennel that's with tie downs.
With tie downs. Okay. So you use kennel. Great. Okay. I thank you for that, actually, because that brings up a point for me. I do not use kennels. I find it very challenging with my dogs and their disabilities. I don't use them. My dogs are secured in place so they can't move around. If we're going on a long trip, we'll talk a little bit about it in equipment, but they do have safety tested harnesses that they will wear, keep everybody as safe as we possibly can. But thank you. That is a very, very individual decision, whether you choose to use crates, tie downs, any of that. So make sure you're thinking about the positives and the negatives and that go into doing that. So thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so all right, if you have a car, where is the dog riding? Back seat with a hammock. Okay, we'll talk about those. We'll talk about hammocks and equipment in a little bit. Okay, so a couple things to think about with the cars. If you have a dog riding in the front seat in a car, the front door on the passenger side usually opens to a much wider angle than the one in the back seat. So can be great if you want to use, like I said, we're going to talk about steps and platforms. If you want to use some sort of aid to help them get up and in, you have a much better chance to do that. One of the drawbacks is it's usually much more difficult for them to get into the footwell and then up onto the seat, because that's up, curving back to get up on the seat. So there are a lot of turns and a lot of angles there. The other thing you need to worry about when you're riding with, you have a dog riding in the front seat, is their weight. So if they're over 40 pounds, you need to be cognizant of the airbags. The airbags will deploy for a dog that's over 40 pounds. So that could be life-threatening. You need to be mindful of that and understand that. Check your manufacturer book that shows you how to either turn that off or change where your dog sits, either one. Okay, some of the cars today actually have a little bit higher step up, like the cross treks. They're more like an SUV car. Sometimes the step from the ground to the bottom of the frame of the car tends to be a little bit higher. So making sure that you're adjusting for that as your dog's mobility changes and as your strength and your physical health changes based on all the picking up of the dog that you're doing to get them in and out of the car. If your dog rides in the back seat, who is a car back seat, right? Okay, so again, you're going to want to look at that frame to the ground. How far is that? One of the other elements you're going to look at is how far back is the front seat. So as the back seat slides back, you lose leg room for the back seat. Right? It's like riding in an airplane and someone decides to take a nap in your lap. So thinking about what that looks like, especially if they get on the driver's side. Driver's side, you don't tend to mess around with your seat a whole lot. You get it where you want it and you stay comfortable. If they're on the passenger side, you have a little bit more flexibility. But looking at that space is going to be important. You also have more opportunity for a dog to be able to go into the footwell and then up onto the seat, because you have the whole back seat for them to be able to go up and over. Rather than in the front seat, there's usually a console or a gear shift if you're driving a stick. So you have a whole lot less space in that front seat. If you do it back seat, you've got a little bit more room. Now, this also assumes you do not have a hammock. If you have a hammock, all of that is off the table and you've got to go straight up to the seat. We'll talk a little bit more about hammocks. Everybody's clear on what a hammock is? So drape right across the seat. Okay, so when you're looking at SUVs, the height from if you're loading into the back end, the height from the bumper to the ground really depends on the size of your SUV. I happen to drive a Subaru, which I guess is not technically an SUV, but it's not low. But there are I've seen some Highlanders and some Land Rovers that are like waist high and sometimes higher. So you want to think about that. Are there running boards? If you're going to do side, is there a running board? That can be a positive and a negative, because you can hook a ramp up to the side of the running board. Sometimes that makes it a little easier. Sometimes it just cracks your shins when you try to get your dog in. So you want to be thinking about those things. SUVs are notorious for having very shallow angles for the doors opening to the back seat. It's like I sometimes will have trouble getting into the back seat because the door doesn't open wide enough. It's like I have to kind of turn in and get my body in there. It makes me feel really slim when I have to do that. But that can be a challenge. So you want to check that out, especially if you haven't already made any equipment purchases. You don't want to get something and say, oh, that's going to be a great idea. I can hook that right up to the back. Look, it says you can hook it right up to the back seat door. Well, yeah, no, normally that doesn't work. So these are the things that I want you to take a look at before you make any purchases, before you make any decisions on how that's going to go. Okay, how many of you lift your dog into the car? Okay. How heavy is your dog?
33 pounds.
33 pounds. 70? 20. Okay. Just to lift the butt up. Okay. All right. So you want to make sure when you're doing your lifting techniques that you're taking care of your own back. We'll talk a little bit about equipment in a second that will make that a little bit easier for you. There are a couple of different ways that you can lift. You can do the shrimp. So that's one hand behind the back legs, one hand in front of the front legs, lift straight up. If you've got a dog with any sort of neurologic or spine condition, would not recommend that one. We want to keep that spine nice and flat. You can do the forklift, which is one that if I have to, I prefer, but you have to have some good bending skills to do this one. Arms out straight like a forklift, in front of the back legs, behind the front legs, lift straight up, turn, drop in. There are some dogs that don't really appreciate that when you're pushing on a lot of soft tissue there. And if you have an incontinent dog, be careful with that one, because guess where your backhand is? Right on the bladder. So be ready for that one. The other one is kind of a combination. I'll go in front of the front legs, through and have my arm on their chest, and then shrimp from the back, and then lift in. It really is going to be dependent upon what your dog is comfortable with, and how they're feeling that day, because you can make them feel uncomfortable if you don't lift them up quite right. I prefer to use ramps, steps, or platforms, but my favorite in combination with all of those is to use a harness. I specifically like the Help 'em Up harness. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a second, but that one is a savior no matter what the size of your dog is. It's a huge help. I always tell my clients, if you're gonna spend some money and you're gonna invest to make it easier for you to move your dog, spend $100 and get a great harness. Don't try to get a cheaper one. Get the one that works and the one that is going to last you through this dog and maybe into your next 2 or 3. They're really great harnesses. Okay, so let's talk about that equipment for loading and unloading. Now, a lot of folks will, especially if you have an SUV or you're going into the back, you're thinking about a ramp. Ramps I happen to like, but there are some details about the ramps that can make them much easier for you and much easier for your dog. What's the portability like? So you have this great ramp, it works fantastic, and then it takes up half of your cargo area and it falls on your dog while you're driving. So what does that look like? There are some that are trifold, so they fold in on each other. There are some that telescope, so they become half their normal length. How much do they weigh? I had a client about 5 or 6 years ago, had a beautiful little beagle and a golden retriever or lab, and she bought this amazing ramp. And the ramp was, and she was probably in her 80s, still very, very active. The ramp weighed 30 pounds, and she couldn't use the ramp because it was too heavy. She couldn't get it into the car. So thinking about that, whenever you go to buy one, if you go and look on Chewy, there must be, I bet there are 40 different styles of ramps. So there's some things that you really want to look at, how much do they weigh? How wide are they? How long are they? What's the surface? What is the material on the surface? Some of those materials I like better than others. What are they made out of? Are they aluminum? Are they wood? If they're wood, I'd stay away from them out here. They dry up in the dry Southwest. If you're back east, it might be a problem with humidity. So plastic, aluminum are my kind of go-tos on that. The surface of the ramp is also important. So it needs to be something that your dog is comfortable walking on. So most common ones are going to be a grit, looks like a sand that's been painted on. So a grit, a carpet. Carpets are fine. It's great if those can be removed. A lot of them will have like Velcro on them so you can wash them, because I guarantee they're going to get soiled somehow, whether it's bodily fluid or just junk from driving, from traveling. Some of them are fake grass. I find those to be slippery sometimes, especially for our older dogs who can't get the nails in. They're nice and soft, they feel good, but if they don't have a deep enough nap for the nails to get in, they can be a little slippery, especially when they're wet. There are others that have ridges or treads on them to help slow down the process. You might see those like on a boat slip. Similar thing. Those can be tricky with older dogs and unlevel and uneven footfalls on those areas. So thinking about your own dog when you're looking at making a purchase, these are just some details on that. Now we talked about length. So length and width are, I think, probably two of the most important things. So if you've got a 70-pounder, okay, you're going to be looking for as wide a ramp as you can find. Now, 20-pounder, this is Louis, right? So 20-pounder, he's not quite as wide, but he's still a Frenchie. So he has a wide berth in the back end. So you want to have something that is wide enough for him to normally stand, and then when he starts to walk, a little bit wider, because there's going to come a time when they might lose their balance, and you need a little bit of play in that. The other thing to remember is when you read the width on your manufacturer's listing, those include the size. That is not the walking surface. That is the width. So normally you're going to subtract 2 inches from whatever you read, because each side they're going to, especially if it telescopes, you've got to have a rail, and the walking surface normally doesn't wrap over the edges. You don't want to do that, right? You want to have some sort of guide on the side or an indicator that they're getting close to the edge. So making sure that you're paying attention to what that walking surface width actually is. Now, when we talk about length, length is your key here, because the longer it is, the more gentle the slope. So if you have, a 45-inch ramp, you're like, oh, that should be fine. That's like this, because remember, it has to sit on the car somewhere. And if it's an SUV, you might as well not have one. So you're looking for as long as you can handle. So you want to look at the length as it compares to the weight of the ramp. And those are going to be, my favorite one is an extra long, and it's 87 inches. And when I had an 85-pound dog, he was tall, that's what he could handle. It was 17 inches wide, which means we had 15 inches of walking surface. And it was big. I bet the thing weighed 18, 20 pounds, but it's what he needed to be able to be confident enough to go up. So we've got a lot of different variables in here. If you have a dog who's not super comfortable, there are ramp training techniques that I could do a whole hour talk on, but I'm not going to do that. But let me just tell you this, that if you buy a ramp, do not try to use it in the parking lot where you bought it. Bring it home, introduce it properly, let them get used to the surface. It's a process, okay? It's a process. So don't think you can just take it out and use it. Okay, and finally, you want to make sure that you get one that has the right weight capacity. So don't buy one for a Frenchie when you need it for a German Shepherd, okay? All right, other option are steps. I don't think it's any secret that most steps on the market have been made for small dogs 25 pounds and under. They're usually very cute and soft, and they have a fun little pattern on them. If you're going to use steps, make sure that they were created for a dog that is the proper size. The thing about steps is you need to think about how sturdy are they, and are they deep enough? So the step itself. Have you ever been walking up steps to a building and you're like, man, these are just like the shortest steps ever, or they're too long and you can't quite get your pace right? So the depth of that step is really important. So it needs to match more closely to what your dog actually strides like. So if you have a tall dog, you need to make sure that they have enough room to comfortably put those front legs on. Some of the same things still apply to like we were talking about the ramps. What are the materials? There are some that are hinged, so you can turn them into a ramp, or you can push it closer together and it accordions and it becomes stairs. Now those pack down to about like this. They're relatively heavy. They're a little bit clunky to work with, but for bigger dogs, those could be a good option. You want to think about, do they move? And this is true on anything, whether it's a platform, a step, or a ramp. How much shimmy is in there? That's gonna kill your dog's confidence until they get comfortable that that's okay and it's not going to go all the way down. So again, thinking about the construction and the portability. Those also have very similar coverings to the steps. So the grit and the grass, the carpet. So figuring out what your dog likes to stand on, again, is important. Let's see. Platforms. I personally love a platform. We don't have one in here. How many of you have an RV or have been near an RV? Okay, so a lot of RVs, you can't just like step into them. There's a big, like you'd have to like step up to like here to get in. So they have these things that are called RV steps, and they're flat, and they have these legs sometimes that just fold underneath them so you can store them flat. Some of these get up to be like 8 inches. So they'll go from like 2 inches to 8 inches. And they're flat and they're usually pretty wide. I like those for side door entering for a dog who's comfortable using a step because it reduces the height. It also gives them a bigger step area to push off of. And it also doesn't get in your way as you're trying to help them in or direct them to where you want them to go. So I like RV steps. So if you want to think outside the box on something that is going to be helpful, and they're all of the RV steps are great for any size dog because 90% of almost all the time, those are weighted for 250-pound people at minimum. So you don't have to worry about their suitability for that. So I do like those a lot. Okay, so last thing that I think is, like I said, the best tool for travel is a help 'em up harness. And I think, is everybody familiar with the help 'em up harness? Okay, so, well, I have one right here. We might as well just pop one open here. These are amazing. And it looks daunting to start with. This happens to be a male. And they come in, let's see, I think they come in 5 different sizes. And this gives you a handle in the front and the back. Could you get me Moby? Thank you. So this is a medium size. And I happen to love these because now if I want to help my dog, I've got a handle on the front between the shoulder blades and a handle on the hips. And it just makes it so much easier for me to support. And believe it or not, this is a big key. Oh, thank you. There's Moby. There's my boy. Hi, buddy. So this is Moby. So now whenever I want to help Moby get in anywhere, I can go up, front feet up, lift the back end, Moby walks himself in. So not only is it great for you, it really increases their independence. I no longer have to shrimp or forklift or come up with some weird way that I can get them in, right? I can get them to the point. This, I think it's key that you know that it's a help them up. It's not a do it, you do all of it. This gets them in the position where they can then help themselves to get up and move. So this is if I did an infomercial, this would be the product that I would recommend that you use. I think they're just fantastic. And when we're talking about all of these things, how using steps and using ramps and planks and all of that, patience is so important because remember, they have to get through their confidence, how they feel about using this new piece of equipment, and whether or not it's actually going to be a help. Because if you introduce it too fast or you expect them to be able to do something that they're not comfortable with, it's not a help. It's now become one more thing that is handicapping them. So how you introduce it, I think, is going to be really important to the success of it. And knowing that if you can try to remember that they're not giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time when they're trying to acclimate to something new. And I would also encourage you to introduce things like this sooner than you think you need them. So the more able they are to use them at the beginning, the easier it's going to be when they really, really need to have them. Okay. All right. All right. So let's move on to talking about in-vehicle safety and creating a safe space. So for those of you that drive SUVs, giving them more space in the back is not necessarily good. That's more room to move around. That's more room to be tossed around. That's more room to fall. So you want them to have enough space to be comfortable, to be able to lie down, but they don't need to be journeying across your car, right? They don't need to be walking from the very tailgate all the way up to see you in the front, right? You want them to have a space that, a nice, comfortable bed. When we talk about, do you have their favorite orthopedic bed back there, or one of them that they're comfortable in? Does it have bolsters around the edges? Can it help support them and keep them so that they want to just stay in that bed? Do you want them to be able to stand up and look out the window? Is that part of what they enjoy? So considering some of those pieces is going to be important. I did mention that I use when we travel long distances, we use a rough wear car harness that has been safety tested. So I think there are two companies that do that I know of right now, and there may be more. One of them is Roughwear, and one of them is SleepyPod. SleepyPod has some great products. They have both carriers and they have harnesses. So mostly what you'll see in those is they don't have a lot of plastic on them that could shatter on impact. Most of those are made with metal so that there's nothing that can break. Good high quality woven material for the straps, for the webbing. So both of those, I'd encourage you to take a peek at those. Now the other in-car or in-vehicle piece that I like is a hammock. I happen to use a hammock that's made by Meadowlark. I like this one because most of the hammocks that I see out there that are a little bit less expensive, one, they're a slippery material. Right? They're a nylon because they're easy to take out and wash off. That's great unless your dog has trouble standing up and is slippery. Then they're just down. So you have a greater risk for injury with those. One of the other reasons that I like Meadowlark is it has what is that material called? It's like a canvas. That's what the dogs, what was that? Quilted canvas, thank you. And it's shaped almost like a box. So you can zip up both edges. I never thought that was such an important deal until I was driving with my DM dog and I had to hit the brakes and she was just sitting looking out the window, and the next thing I knew, she was face first into the footwell because the hammock had moved. It had slid, so she did a header. So I got one that zipped up the side and we've never had an issue with that. So it also makes me feel good about, especially if you have a dog who is excited to get out, they're not going anywhere until we get unzipped. I'm going to date myself here, but it reminds me, remember the old refrigerator boxes when you were a kid? You'd get in and like make it a train or a car or something, draw on the outside. I know, eye roll, right? That's kind of how it's shaped. It's a big rectangular box that goes in the back. Same thing, secures to the headrests, so it's nice and secure. Keep up the side. There are some loops that go over the, I call them Jesus bars. I'm sure that's not a good thing, but the little handle that you hold on to, as in, oh, Jesus. So the little hook that goes across, that keeps it from sliding down the side. So I really like those. You want to look for one that, like I said, is not slippery, should have some waterproof properties to it, especially if you have an incontinent dog, and is not slick on that surface. Okay, bedding and support. We talked a little bit about preventing shifting. So if you have a dog who doesn't control their movement very well, kind of like Kahlua, my boxer who flew into the footwell, she really didn't have control over her body from here down. So one little move and she could be all over. So it's fine to use bedding, blankets, anything like that to kind of lock them into a spot. Use the parts of your car where, you know, the corners of your car where you can keep them safe, secure. They can see out the window. You can help control their temperature as well, which is another piece. So if you're going to have them, you're going to have your dogs in the cargo area or even the back seat. Depending on how new your car is, you may not have air to the back. So think about how you're going to be able to get airflow back there. I've had some dogs who didn't like to ride with the windows down. I've had some who, no matter what the temperature or the weather is, has to have the windows down, Half Moon, because he gets, I don't know, he thinks that something is wrong if the windows aren't down. So it doesn't matter if it's raining or whatever, they have to be down. So figuring out how you can get that airflow back there, I've purchased, there are fans, little kid fans that you can hook on to the back of the seat that blow at the kid in the baby seat. You can use those. I've hooked those up. Those just hook into your cigarette lighter. Most cars today will have multiple outlets for you to be able to do that. So think about that. And remember that if you have an older dog, they're going to have a much more difficult time regulating their temperature than some of the younger ones. I think it goes without saying, but don't leave your dog in a car. Once we get over about 65 degrees here, or even 60, you're going to run the risk, especially if you have the windows open. It becomes a hot box and it becomes a deadly situation. So please don't do that. Motion sickness. Anybody have dogs that are motion sick? A little bit? Okay. Always talk to your veterinarian about that. You have some options pharmaceutically. If you're not sure, you can start out with some ginger. There are dog treats made. Ginger is a natural settling purpose. You know, it's a product. So if you ever go on a boat, they normally will serve like ginger snaps or something like that. So it's a settler for them. Okay. And remember, small amounts of water. There are water bowls out there that are made to be no spill. So they actually kind of look like a bedpan because they have the edges and then there's the hole in the middle. They can drink out of them without spilling the water. Okay. Next thing I want to get to is I want to talk about a go bag. Does anybody have a go bag or know what it is? Okay. All right. So I love the concept of a go bag. And the reason I do is it's one place to have everything that your dog could need. You never know what's going to happen on your trips, and the contents are really going to depend on what your dog needs, right? So if you have a dog that has upset stomach or is, you know, this tendency to have motion sickness, you're going to have different things in here. My dogs happen to be incontinent, so the big piece in here filled with pads and wraps. So I like to have these organized in a way that makes sense to me. So I'll just go through this one quickly and you guys might maybe get some ideas on what would work for you. So I have 3 incontinent dogs at home. So, and of course they all have to wear different sizes. So, but thankfully they're all males. So I've got an assortment of wraps that I use. I also have pads. So my guys wear, these are women's incontinence pads. That's what we use to line the belly bands. So I've got plenty of those in here. I also carry a bandana. Bandanas are great. They can be soaked with water. They can be cooling. They can soak up blood if we need to. They can be used for a lot of things. They can be used as a rag. They can have a lot of different purposes. So I like to just carry a bandana. I have a spare pair of socks in here. So if I had a dog that ripped out a toenail or something was going on their feet, I could put the socks on. I also love to carry, these are cord keepers. So they're cord organizers that you would use on your, like when your cords under your computer get out of control. I use these, we use them here a lot to, what did I do with those socks? Oh, here they are. So I can put my sock on and then I can put this on just snug enough to keep the sock from falling off. So I love these. So I've got my socks. I have one dog who gets cold a lot, and he's kind of mouthy about it. So Half Moon has his own T-shirt. Handle for my bag if I need it. I also carry a small blanket. This is a baby blanket. It's a nursing blanket. So these I like because they're super thin, but they're a flannel. So there are some warming properties in this as well. And I like to kind of batch things in a particular place. So these are all like cloth things that I could use for wiping up or covering. This area is kind of my first aid area over on one side. So I've got some triple antibiotic ointment. I've got a wound spray if I need it. I've got gloves, and I have hand sanitizer here as well. I've got some tongue depressors, some very sad looking Q-tips. I've got, this is a Telfa pad, which is a coated gauze pad, so it doesn't stick to the wound in case we need that. So I've got those. And to get that Telfa to stick on there, I've got a couple of different kinds of tape. So this is vet wrap. Vet wrap is very handy. Not only can it hold on a bandage, but if you roll it up or fold it, it becomes very strong. So if you need to make a handle for something, vet wrap is a good way to go. So I've got a roll of that. This happens to be Kinesio tape. It sticks really well, especially if you have a short-haired dog. So if I need to tape something on and get it to stay on them, I like this instead of, what's the other stuff that's the, yeah, the super sticky tape that's stretchy. It's usually like tan with a red strip down the middle of it. I can't think of what it's called. Yeah, Elasticon. I like it better than Elasticon because it comes off much more easily. And I've also got a roll of gauze. So this could be great, you know, if I had to stem bleeding for whatever reason, just take the whole thing and put it on there and let it absorb. It's also a great way to help keep the Telfa on, because you don't want the vet wrap directly on the hair because it really pulls the hair out and it's really uncomfortable. So obviously I'm not going to be doing any major bandaging, but if I need to get something under control until I can get somewhere I'm safe, I have that. Got my vaccination records for everybody. Just fold those up really snug. And then for some reason, when I was going through taking all this out, I found that I had 4 pairs of scissors in here. So I trimmed it down to 2. So these are what are called trauma shears. So these are great for if you really need to get in and cut something out. These are tiny, so if I need to something that's a little bit less onerous, I've got that. I am a woman of a certain age, so I have my cheaters, so I can see what I'm doing. Nail trimmers. You got broken nail, something like that, you can at least get a big piece of it off. And of course, I have my poop bags because, again, it's always good to have poop bags, but when you travel with dogs who are urinary fecal incontinent, there will be poop in the car, so you should just accept that and be prepared for that. So that's why I have not 1, but 2 rolls of that. Comb in case we get some stuff stuck in the coat. I also have a multi-tool that I actually had to use this last week. It's got big pliers on the end of it. Guess who stepped on a cactus? So I was able to grab a hold of that, get that out. That was good. I got that. And I also carry a Sharpie. So Sharpies are good for a lot of things. You think about if there's a cut on the leg, you think there might be some early infection, or you see something that's moving, you can actually draw on the dog's coat so you know where it was, right? Until you can get to the veterinarian, they can see if there's change coming. Worst comes to worst, something happens, you can write your name and phone number on your dog. So the simple Sharpie comes in very handy. I also would normally have in here some Benadryl in case I know that my dog blows up if he eats a spicy jalapeno raisin that flies. He will blow up. So the Benadryl will help with that. If you live somewhere, like if you're going into the mountains, you should probably have a tip key in here as well. And that will help you get the whole tick out, not just the body. You'll get the legs as well. And if you were wondering, this is actually a brush to get hair off. So, yep, betadine can be good as well. That's one. It's difficult for me to have anything that is susceptible to heat, because in our, inside my car is going to get up into the 140 degree, 150 degrees. So it's hard to do that. I also always carry a container of baby wipes. These are great for so many things. Especially, like I said, if you have a dog that's incontinent, that's primarily what I use them for, but they're great for a lot of other things, but they're difficult to keep from drying out. I would recommend you leave them in the package. I've tried taking them out thinking that would seal them better. It doesn't. Leave them in the original package. Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about, finally, productive rest stops. Now, we all know what's supposed to happen on a rest stop. Everybody gets to get a little bit of relief, but you want to figure out, when should I have the rest stop? How long should I go? So usually 2 to 3 hours is about the max you want to go before you give your dog a break to get out of the car. If they have to go to the bathroom, get out and walk around. Older dogs are going to get stiffer the longer you make them stay in the car. So letting them get out and stretch their legs is going to be important as well. You want to be careful when you're getting out. You want to think very carefully about where you're going to stop. If you have a dog that you know is nervous, doesn't like sounds, doesn't like a lot of people, you probably don't want to stop at a busy rest stop. Might make sense just to get off at an exit, go find some place that's a little bit quieter to be able to do that. Make sure you use good leashing routines, as far as making sure you have that leash on and secure, collars are secure and on before they get out of the car. So keeping them safe that way. If you have a dog in a cart, make sure that you're in a space where the dog can actually be in the cart to go out and relieve themselves, get a little walk. So you don't want to stop where there's not enough space for them to be able to do that safely. You want to think about what they're rolling through as well, making sure that that's easy for them as well. So light water, a little bit of water, some light snacks if they need it. If they're like my kids, they've been asking for a snack the whole time. Mom, when are we going to get there? When do I get my Charlie Bear? That kind of thing. Or, oh, I don't want a Charlie Bear. I want a beef liver, whatever. Sometimes it's good, especially if you've got a senior dog, do a little gentle stretching after you're done walking with them. Remember, you always want to stretch a warm muscle. Don't try to stretch them just straight out of the car. Let them get some of the kinks worked out. If you need to do some stretching, go ahead and do that. Shade on rest stops, if you're traveling during the summer, is super important. Especially be mindful of how the sun is beating in on the area where your dog is. So if they're in the back and they're getting the brunt of the sun, be mindful of that. The temperature that you feel and the temperature that they feel are going to be very, very different. Especially you have most of the air conditioning up front. So just being mindful of that. The other thing, of course, you want to be mindful of pavement temperatures when you get out of the car. Make sure you've got boots on, or try to get to a place where you've got some grass or some non-cement asphalt blacktop kind of a setup. Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions? I've been yakking for a while. Does anybody have any questions?
Back with that, I guess, with a small dog, so you were saying it's help them so it's not pulling.
Right. You're not going to walk around like this.
Okay.
So if we're talking about a small dog, you want to get them to the spot where you can help them go from point A to point B, but you don't do it yourself. You want them to do it. So when you're talking about getting into a car, this is it's an amazing accompaniment to teaching a dog to use a ramp and having them use it safely. That's where I love them the most, because not only can you lift, but you're actually pushing with the back end. These are designed to come up back through here. So when I'm asking a dog to go forward, I'm actually exerting some pressure. I'm actually exerting some pressure on how the dog is moving through. So I'm going to do this rather than this, right? I'm going to push forward. That's going to encourage them to continue to walk. That makes sense. I mean, it's a little harder with the smaller dog because the mindset is, well, I'll just pick you up, put you in. And that becomes hard to kind of overcome because you want them to be as independent for as long as possible. Now, there's going to come a time when you are probably going to have to pick them up, but you want them to be able to continue to do what they have been doing for as long as possible. Okay. Now, I know we had a question about mobility challenged dogs who are also blind and have a hearing. Yes, and having a hearing impairment. Okay. Completely blind. Okay. So a couple of things you're going to need to consider. Blind dogs can be have more motion sickness, right? Because they don't. I haven't
traveled with him since he's lost his sight.
Okay. So that's going to be something you really want to think about. Because if you think about, how many of you have been on a boat? Or you've been on water and they tell you, look at the horizon. Well, guess what a dog can't do, right? A blind dog can't see that horizon. They can't pick that out. So being mindful of that is going to be important. The hearing, I really think, depends on how far the impairment is gone along, because sometimes, and what part of the register that they've lost. So do they hear super high pitches or do they hear a low voice? And sometimes you can pick that out based on how they react to something. And you may also have a situation where they don't have great hearing, but there are certain things that just, bam, go right in and they hear it. It's very startling, kind of like a phone ringing. You're kind of, it's jarring. So the sound of the travel can be a challenge. I'd also think about vibration, the vibration of the car. Rolling, that can also be a big challenge and something to think about. If your dog is not comfortable riding now and you feel like it's not, feel like it might be vibration based, there are things you can buy to put on underneath of your car that help dampen the sound of the vibration. The not necessarily what they feel, but what they could be hearing. There is something, if you do a little research on that, I'm sorry, I can't tell you much more. I just know that it exists. It's almost like a dampening bar that you can hook underneath your car. I would also think that, stopping along the way is going to be a challenge because everything is new. There is no mental map of where things are. So being mindful of, like, if you stop and stay in a hotel, moving as many pieces of furniture away from the area of where you're going to be would be my first recommendation. If you use any sort of, what are those called? Essential oils can be used to give them a hint. So like frankincense is not a particular, I don't like the smell of frankincense. I've heard of folks putting those on edges. So it warns them that there's something there that they don't like through the smell, so they may slow down or draw back from it. Using lavender can be a good calming element during travel. And it's also, most dogs tend to like it, so it's a good thing to have in places where it's okay for them to be. With hearing and sight impairment, those are really like, their number one scent is smell. So their number one scent. So playing off of that and making sure you're taking beds from home, that, you're not washing everything before you go. You know what I mean? That there is a smell there that they're comfortable with. Taking blankets that they have slept on for a few days, just to make sure that they have something that they can understand, that they know where they are. And you can also use those as kind of almost a path, connect, like islands of scent that they understand, getting from place to place. Yeah, it's not easy. How big is your dog?
He's about 33 pounds.
About 33 pounds. About this guy, about Moby?
Little it's shorter than mowing.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so I think your big focus should be on scent. What familiar scents can I bring with me that make this feel like it's okay? That's where I would go. And know that sight and sound are their number 2 and 3 senses anyway. So yes, we'd love for them to be able to see, and they'd love to be able to see. But it's not like us losing vision. It's different. It's very different. Okay, did that answer your question? You're welcome. Okay, anybody else have any questions? Yes.
Because of Arizona, I don't have to explain the summer heat or whatever.
Yep.
4 questions.
Yes.
When you put the black fabric,
Mm-hmm.
are they gonna feel that versus?
This particular fabric is perforated. So the air flows through this. What you can't see is there's a perf in it. So yes, it's solid, but it's perforated so the air flows through.
Okay.
Okay. So it's not as hot as it looks. That's the short answer to your question.
Because I think here we're having a hard time finding the lighter colors
Yeah.
that we may need.
Yeah. So what you wouldn't want is you wouldn't want to have a whole cape of this. So where this fits on the dog, you have a very small space here of where that's going to be. And we talked earlier a little bit about swamp cooling vests, which I think are fantastic. Those can also be used when you travel, especially if you have black dogs that you travel with. Putting the swamp cooler vest on, let the air flow across them, it really does a good job of keeping the dogs cool and help regulating temperature. Like if we try to go, I've tried to go somewhere here in August, we tried to go to Chiricahua, which is 2.5 hours away, in mid-August, and we had to put all the dogs in swamp cooler vests to keep them cool, to get them there, even with the air conditioning on high. So know your environment, know where you're going. Swamp cooler vests are made by Roughwear, by the way, and there are a couple of different versions. Yes.
Yeah, we have those. If you were traveling, would you put any of those in the ice chest? Just
You
to keep
can.
them a little cooler?
You can.
And the other thing is, do they make any vests now that you can put ice packs in?
You don't necessarily need them.
Okay.
So because you put you douse the vests in water, the air traveling across the water will cool the body. So you don't need the ice packs.
The last thing is
Yes.
the kid fans.
Yes, kid fans.
Little kid fans.
Yeah.
So it's picking up the air conditioning in the front seat.
And blows it.
Back to it.
Yeah. If nothing else, it's moving the air.
Right.
Okay.
And then the old trick where you had to crack the back window just a little bit to draw it back. You still do that? Or?
I don't, because especially when we're driving around here, that's just a little crack that's letting more hot air in.
Okay.
So I don't do that. But you have to check that out where you're headed.
Oh, one more.
Yeah.
The hammock that we have in the
Hammock,
back
yeah.
seat. The reason for the seats, I understand that. Do we want it as wide as possible or as narrow as possible? The backs or the front seats, how far back they go for the hammock?
I don't think that matters as much if you're not having them get into the footwell. So the more you think, the greater the distance between the 2 points where they connect, the shallower it will be. Okay, so that means you'll have less area where they can sit. Okay, if you think about it, comes down and it dips, right? It comes down like this. They'll have the whole seat area. Once you start moving that out, they start losing areas that they can stand in. So if you have your front seats where you want them to be, I think that's more important than driving like this, right? So because if you make it too shallow, if you make it, it's almost like it's going to go straight across. They don't have anywhere they can step down onto the seat, the solid seat underneath the hammock. The shallower you make it, the more you take that away from them.
Okay.
So the short answer, made long, be comfortable in where you are and how you're driving. Okay. All right. Any other questions? No? Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here, and thanks for coming out. I really appreciate it. Excellent. Thanks.